we can let you off with 2 years. Federation penal colony. Sounds great to me. I'll take a Federation penal colony right now for 2 years. Right now, on purpose, I'll break the law right now to get it. That would be so fun. Sit tight. We'll be right there, Dingwall. Yeah, we just need enough power just to get the warp core turned over once. Then we can get going. We'll shoot you over an umbilical. Just remember to put the positive on the positive and the negative on the negative. Whoa! This is going to be a weird review. This is ad aspera per aspera, which I believe, from my prior knowledge, translates to through struggle the stars. The stars. I believe the phrase the stars. I believe the phrase the stars is mentioned no fewer than 3 times. This episode, call it New Trek speak if you want, but I've noticed inclination towards referring to space in romantic terms. A little strange, but hey, this is TOS, as it were. That being said, if you're watching something taking place in the TOS time frame, flashbacks to things before TOS are precious and few and far between, and sadly we're missing out on some juicy ones this episode. This episode felt a little bit cheap. You could say that just from the way the script is, it's kind of like a bottle episode. Previously, that would be an episode taking place entirely in the ship. This is an episode taking place entirely in small rooms. Maybe that's your cup of tea. Maybe it's not. For me, I didn't really love this episode. I feel like I'm supposed to love it. But for me, this one misses more than it hits. We'll say that. This is ad astra per aspera, which was an age-old motto of the Federation. Or was it before the Federation? A very old term. With that out of the way, let's see what's popping in Season 2, Strange New Worlds, Episode 2. Well, this episode, if you watched the previous one, you'll know that Pike was mysteriously absent. That's because he was looking for legal aid, help, what do you call it, an attorney? I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. That will become obvious by the end of this review, I think, to help the case for Una Chin Riley. That's number 1, the first officer aboard the Enterprise. As you'll know, if you watched the recap before this episode, the previous episode, or last season, Una is an Illyrian. That means she has availed herself in a way of genetic augmentation. It was not her choice. It is, quote, from the text of this episode, a cultural choice. It's done without their consent and done before they're born. Without consent, take from that what you will. Okay? Can anyone really consent to being born? I have no idea. Big philosophical question. I wear a red shirt for a reason. I don't worry how much about, how good the hot dog tastes, if the hot dog helps people, if the hot dog's bad. I'm more involved with the making of the hot dog. The part that no one wants to see. The nitty gritty. The spanners, the injectors, the manifold, that sort of thing. So don't ask me about the broader picture. Let's just stay down in the nitty gritty. In this case, that's Pike going to this planet that seems to be populated by Illyrians who quote unquote pass. In this episode, it's brought up that some Illyrians cannot pass openly as non-genetically engineered, and it would have been so cool to see them, but we don't. We just happen to see Illyrians that pass as humanoids, I guess you could say. I don't know what it entails to pass. There's a lot of Federation citizens, people in Starfleet. A lot of them look really quote-unquote strange to you or me, but what does passing entail? I don't know. We never see a good example. Like I said, would have been cool to spend a little bit more money and see some Illyrians who couldn't pass. Maybe they got like 3 legs or something, or wings, or I don't know, they're see-through. It would have been cool, but we don't see that. We go to this office building. We're looking for, I think her name was Neera. These Star Trek names run together in my head a lot now. I swear we've heard of the name Neera like 10,000 times by now. It's just so obvious. Pike needs to see her. She needs this attorney, I think you call it, to litigate on behalf of Una. Your mileage may vary with this episode depending on how much you know about legal terms and things. People are going to probably say, I can hear it now, I don't want to watch Star Trek that's just about a courtroom drama. Well, we've had it before. We've had Measure of a Man. We've had Court Martial. Just saying that is not enough of an excuse to dislike it. You can dislike it for whatever reason you want, but you should probably offer a reason why it doesn't work. Appealing to the past is not a catch-all defense, as if you know how I feel about these things, you'll know that you cannot appeal to a past episode to make excuses for why this one's allowed to be bad. This one has to be bad for its own reasons. Okay, so it would be more fair to compare it to those court episodes. But this episode, if you've seen it before or you're listening to me now, the whole thing is just the courtroom. It wasn't really my thing. To be totally fair with you, past episodes of this were never really my thing. I was never a big Measure of a Man guy. I was never a big Court Martial guy. They did it again in Deep Space Nine at some point, I think. They were never really for me, and that's okay. So just so, as a disclaimer, so you know where I'm coming from, Pike has to get through the office, right? I need to get through the waiting room to get to the other waiting room. I just got to get past this person at the desk. And you can't breathe the air here. The air is not suitable for humans. It's suitable for Illyrians who have been modified to accommodate, breathing of this different atmosphere. And Pike chooses to risk his life by walking in, running out of oxygen, saying, I can wait. No, you can't. You're running out of air. She's booked up. She can't see you now. Oh, I can wait. Wink, wink. And then he almost kills himself waiting. The captain of the Enterprise. There's a lot of people who rely on you. What if she was really booked up? What if he arrived and she couldn't see him? I'm sorry, Pike, I just can't do it. You're gonna die. What if that happened? Did they think of that? I was like, wow. Dramatic way to open your episode, right? Pike's almost gonna die running out of oxygen. Good thing we were just playing. I was just ribbing. Don't worry, you can see her. Whatever. So he gets in to see Neera. I think that's her name. Would you take this case? No, I don't want to take this case. Snarky dialogue abound. I had a history with Una. Of course she has a history with Una. Because that's, it's like pathos. It's like, it's drama. Oh man, what's going to happen here? They're going to patch things up? Are they going to fight? Is it going to come to fisticuffs? Well, they trade blows verbally. Neera, would you take this case? I know you don't like the Federation. This is New Trek, so there's always a little bit of an apology tour for the Federation. You can never really get around it. In this case, it has to do with not allowing genetically modified people into Starfleet. Frankly, I'm just be totally honest. You don't want to broach complicated subjects that reverberate through the canon in the past, right? TOS has been established. We've seen things after it. I wouldn't go playing with that kind of stuff in TOS backwards. Leave that for Prodigy. I loved it in Prodigy. It takes place far enough into the future that the reverberations that move outward from any decision on genetic modification that would take place in Prodigy would benefit the future without interrupting canon. You got to think of it like that, right? So the sentiment is not wrong. It's just that why are we trying to do this back in time in TOS? It's kind of always why I was not on board with the decision of making Una an Illyrian. I mean, call Una a blank slate, you can do whatever you want, but it was just kind of strange that we had a genetically modified person as an Illyrian with Una and Noonien-Singh on the same ship, and we just rammed in Cadet Uhura. Wink, wink. We're all here. We're all one big fat happy family. It's a little bit convenient. You could even maybe say it's trite, but this is Strange New Worlds, and generally I'm here for it. I don't want to close off my hurt too much. I want to have some fun too. So I was along for the ride with this episode, as I usually am with Strange New Worlds, although I will say this episode was a little bit more boring than the average for me in terms of Strange New World fare. She takes the case. Neera goes to visit Una. Una is talking with Starfleet officers. She's talking with Batel and another Starfleet officer to her side. Well, listen, in light of your great service to Starfleet, we can let you off with 2 years. Federation penal colony. Sounds great to me. I'll take a Federation penal colony right now for 2 years. Right now, on purpose. I'll break the law right now to get it. That would be so fun, but alas, she doesn't want to take it. She's principled. So Neera convinces her to actually fight against this, much to the chagrin of Batel. Batel, who is a Starfleet captain, a contemporary, a peer of Pike, is now somehow promoted to being a detective, a lawyer, a prosecutor. I don't know. She's fighting against Una. Far from the first time we've seen Starfleet officers be called to stand against their own brethren. Nothing new. But it's just as strange here as it always was, right? I don't know how the legality of this stuff works. And by the way, neither does nobody else, because I don't think anybody in real life is a Starfleet legal expert. If you know about something more so than the average person, and an episode comes up that's about that, and you can call it its mistakes, that kind of sucks. It takes you out of it. But you can maybe take solace in the fact that you don't really know what goes on with Starfleet illegal. Federation legality. I don't know. What's it based on? I've never read it. Have you? I don't think so. So any complaints you may have that you think are fair and obvious are actually geared towards a legal system that you would know in your quote-unquote real life. Not in my life in Starfleet. So we can kind of can it with all these legal remarks, legalese from the legal eagles out there. Then again, I have no clue what I'm talking about either, so your mileage may vary. Batel is saying, listen, do you know how many favors I had to pull to get that 2 years for Una? And then, well, why'd you arrest her? And we're just fighting each other. We're just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. I'm on this side, you're on that side. You're fighting against Una, I'm fighting for Una. And what if the law was wrong? And then Pike cuts a carrot, because we see Pike cooking a lot. And then he gets mad and throws the carrot. Little moments like that, I think, really spruced up this episode. Bringing up this idea that you follow the law, but what if the law is wrong? An interesting conundrum. Meanwhile, Pasalk, a Vulcan who I believe is on the side of the prosecution against Una, he's having a conversation with Spock, and they're kind of like in the mess hall on the Enterprise. At least I assume it's the Enterprise. I'll be damned if we saw the Enterprise even once from the outside this episode, by the way. Not that that's generally a bad thing. You can totally have great episodes that don't even include starships. They're having a conversation. We can't hear them. It's from a distance. Mbenga and Ortegas are like doing that classic thing where you pretend to say what they're saying. Oh, I think it's totally logical that Una ought to be arrested. Yes, you're right, Spock. We should totally throw the book at her. You know, how we classically think Vulcans talk to each other when they probably don't. And then Mbenga, sober second thought says, oh, I don't know. I've seen Vulcans talk a lot. And, you gotta watch the body language. And I don't think what you're saying is happening is really happening here, Ortegas. I don't think, they're going about this totally logically and happily. I think they might be fighting. And of course, Spock walks over and says, I'm sorry for that outburst. He truly brings out the worst in me. And meanwhile, they were just talking with each other completely straight-faced. So good. Although you'll note Spock mentioned his father, which is something he doesn't do very often, or like hardly ever, which just kind of took me off guard. He calls Pasalk Sarek's former colleague. I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. It was a fun moment. What can I say? Possibly my favorite moment. And then we get to the boring scenes that permeate the rest of this episode. The talking with Neera, the court scenes. Maybe you like it. I appreciate the sentiment. I like the outcome. But getting there was a little bit boring. We could have used some cool flashbacks. We could have used some cool aliens. We could have used, sprucing it up a bit, go somewhere else, talk to some other people. Noonien-Singh talks to Neera. Neera has set up shop in Una's former quarters. She ain't using them right now, and Lan's like, what if the evidence was gotten illegally? Like, what if they stole it? Are you familiar with this case where this evidence was thrown out because it was stolen? Well, yes, I was. I am familiar with that case. I do my homework. Is there something you want to tell me? Noonien-Singh, do you know how they got that evidence against Una and used it to arrest her? Do you know how that happened? It is revealed, I believe, that Lan, in a private log that no one was meant to see, mentioned that Lan knew somehow, or she knew that Una was an Illyrian or augmented in some way. So the speculation abounds that her comms were hacked because they're private for a reason, right? But it turns out that was kind of like a red herring. Never really had anything to do with anything. We see a book floating around about the Starfleet legal code. Beautiful looking book. It'd be really cool to have that prop. I believe it's the Starfleet Legal 2256. Our first scene in the courtroom, presiding, Admiral this, Commodore that. I think you get the picture. We just start grilling Robert April. Neera's grilling Robert April over the times he broke the Prime Directive, kind of getting one in on them. It's obvious how she feels about Starfleet and the Federation, and she wanted this opportunity to get a quick jab at him, right? Just like the writers of New Trek. Let's just get a jab at the Federation, a jab at Starfleet as much as humanly possible. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't like it. I don't know why we just grilled Robert April, the Enterprise captain before Pike. Did you or did you not break the Prime Directive on this occasion, on this occasion, on this occasion? And you did it to save lives, correct? Yes. Well, would you have allowed Una in Starfleet? Would you have sponsored her application to Starfleet had you known she was genetically augmented? No. Of course, this upsets Pike. Pike is he's not a pragmatist. He's more in line with just speaking his mind and not worrying about the details later. Is very fly by his pants. Yeah, he's a real Boy Scout, right? That's what they would have you believe. They keep using that word. I don't think it means what they think it means. But, they kind of have a little mini fight later on. Robert April and Pike share a drink. I don't want to drink. I'll drink the rest of this myself. You're not drinking this. I'm drinking this. Sorry, Robert. Sorry, Pike. I wish I didn't have to say that. I wish it could have let me say the piece where I was really, really positive towards Una, and I thought Una was wonderful, and I recommended her for all these promotions and whatever, and medal for gallantry. Sad, though, he wouldn't sponsor Una had he known. It's an interesting question, but I would caution against saying that this is an immutable characteristic, being genetically modified. As we find out later, some weren't. Some chose to forego genetic modification. I wonder if what the Illyrians benefited from through genetic modification could not have been achieved easily through technology provided by the Federation. In the back of my mind, I wonder if the benefit afforded by genetic modification could not be outdone by technological modification that would be provided by the Federation, like non-invasive technology. I do wonder that. I wonder if that's how they convinced a lot of the Illyrians to go non-augmented. It would have been interesting to see exactly how that works. See, that would have been cool in a flashback, but we didn't get it. We get minor flashbacks to Una's past, showing where she broke her leg. In the next courtroom scene, we grill Anne. It goes nowhere. We end up grilling Una. Una is being grilled by her own attorney. I would caution you against badgering your own client. You see, Una tells her story right then and there. We've seen flashbacks of Una before. We didn't get enough of them, as I've reiterated multiple times. You see, some people could pass as non-augmented. Some people augmented. Some people chose not to when the Federation approached with their feelings towards augments. You see, she broke her leg, right? It was getting infected despite her augmentations. She needed to go to a pro-augment doctor to help her leg because she had moved to the augment-free section of this world, city, country, what have you, to alleviate civil unrest. It was divided in twain. One was augment, one was not. They chose to abandon the augments, although it was stated outright. And by the way, I thought you could win the case just based on this. Neera had explained to everyone in the courtroom, Illyrians will do augmentation to babies before they're born as a cultural practice. You just said it's not their choice, and you said it's a cultural practice. If you had pushed on that, you could have won, I think. But we kept going in the direction we were going. Una reveals her past. Eventually I joined Starfleet because of the phrase ad astra per aspera, through struggle of the stars. And I wanted to see the stars, and I believed in Starfleet, and I believed they would accept me eventually if I had just lied, which is what she did, on her application. And ever the serial abandoner, abandoning her augmented countrymen, I guess you could say, abandoning her family, abandoning Neera to join Starfleet. I can see how you might be offended by that. If you were a pro-augment Illyrian, I can see where that might not sit well with you. To me, I cannot speak from experience. I'm not augmented in any way. In case you didn't know, if I was, I'd have hair. But right out of nowhere, randomly. And remember, I've said this multiple times before. Luck is not a strategy. Randomness is not a factor. It shouldn't be when you're strategizing. And if you're writing a plot, you want to win. You want to go A, B, C, logical through line, strategy at every junction, making the right decision multiple times till we get to the victory point. In this episode, that book, it just shows up out of nowhere. It's like Chekhov's gun, except really, really bad. Look it up if you don't know what that is. And I'm not talking about Chekhov's phaser. It was just floating around for the whole episode. And then randomly, turns out you can open it up. This victory did not feel achieved to me. It didn't feel like we poured over the book. It didn't feel like we were all working together. It felt like it's just something came out of nowhere. I may even call it Deus Ex Machina. I don't know if this is the kind of thing that happens in legal drama very often, because I don't really watch it. So maybe if you watch these things, you'll be more positive towards it. Maybe it's a common occurrence that they can just look in the book and find out, oh, look, anyone who is escaping persecution, that would be Una, because she lives with other non-augments, she couldn't go to the hospital, can seek refuge with Starfleet, if it's offered to her by a captain, or whatever. That's paraphrasing it, because it works out that we reveal that Pike is actually involved in this conspiracy. Una reveals that Pike is actually knew for 4 months straight that Una was an Illyrian and chose to hide it. Pasalk very rightly insinuates that this amounts to a breakdown of the chain of command on the United Federation of Planets, Starfleet's flagship, the Enterprise. Very, 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 very serious accusation for conspiracy against the captain, or conspiracy on behalf of the captain to protect Una, who was in violation of the law. However, it is argued by Neera that because of this law that they just found, that retroactively, Pike was harboring Una as like a refugee of some sort, escaping persecution, and therefore it's totally legal and okay. Wipe my hands of that one. Sometimes things just feel wrong. I don't know if it's wrong, but can anybody tell me? Are you allowed to look through the legal books and retroactively attribute a motive to yourself in the past that you never had before at that point to wash your hands of conspiracy or a crime? Are you allowed to do that? I don't know. Methinks people are going to be picking this one apart for a while. That's how we get off. We randomly find this book that just says, oh, look, you're a refugee of some sort. You were, taken to safety by Starfleet. Whoops! Reminds me of Sarah in Discovery. If you don't want to go back and try to watch Discovery, Sarah was taken from his home planet, some kind of kelp farmer, little creature, taken from the planet, and then turned into Starfleet guy, and then never went back, and it's kind of like a refugee, but kind of not, but it kind of reminds me of Una. I don't really want to get into it, but that's how we saved Una. And then we all watched as Neera walked onto that transporter. We all clapped, and hey, same as last episode. Maybe we made a new friend out of an enemy. Neera didn't like the Federation, but maybe we're an inch further towards patching things up. We can only hope. Neera and Una hold hands for long enough that it made me think something was going on. And then Neera just walked off into the distance. And that was the end of this episode. And basically, what we're getting across here, thematically very strong, is that the immutable characteristic that you were born with should not define how far you can go in your career. I think that's what we're trying to get across here, in no uncertain terms. Is this the time or the place? That's my main question. We're solving a problem very neatly, I guess, that I never thought we should have had with Una. I think this is a problem for Discovery Season 5, Season 4, Things in the Future, Prodigy. It's better placed there, where we can use technology to better mitigate any negative effects of having augments, because they're very keen on not showing the opposite side here, without spoiling Deep Space Nine. The Bashir situation comes to mind. Turn the rest of this off if you don't want to spoil Deep Space Nine. But there would be a question around, this is how you would immediately question this. There would be a question around, okay, we can have an augment. What's stopping parents from illegally augmenting their children against their will to get an unfair advantage at the academy? And what could possibly be the negative effects of that? I would argue that the negative effects in the future may be hard to determine now. And if it's hard to determine now, you may be better off ultimately erring on the side of caution and not doing it. That's one way you could look at it. Not the augmented person's fault at all. It's people taking advantage of loopholes. And they're always the first to ruin things for honest people. And I do think Una is honest. I think Dal is honest, if you've watched Prodigy. And that's really sad. But I think that if you set this question in the future, you may then be able to develop a technological way around it to eliminate that loophole, right? So that, therefore, this kind of thematic issue belongs in the later timelines of Star Trek, not really in the TOS and before. That's just the way I feel about it. But I can't fault it thematically. It was strong thematically. There's a thematic through line. I could have used a B-plot. Like I said, I could have used some flashbacks to Una's childhood. It would have been cool to see this Illyrian city. It would have been cool to see people who couldn't pass as non-augmented. That would have been cool. I needed like a kinetic flashback. I needed kinetic reasons to see what was happening. I needed to see Una's backstory. I needed to see the sadness of it. I would have been better off, to use the age-old quote, it would have been more fun to see, not hear. You want to see things happen, not be told they happen. And this episode is very much a tell, don't show. Flying in the face of the medium that this is actually taking place in. This is a visual medium. We're maybe not using it to the best of our abilities. I don't know what the budget was like. I'd like to be a fly on the wall at the production company that's working on these things just to see what's going on. Like I said, this episode, the previous one, they do feel markedly more expensive than Picard. This is not a Picard review. but I would like to have seen a little bit more in this episode. Maybe it would have been cool to combine the first episode and the second episode together into one, like, season 2 premiere movie. Maybe that would have been cool. This episode and the previous one really are a companion to each other, because Pike is gone in one and back in the other. Musically, I heard a few interesting pieces. I heard the TOS musical sting here and there. Didn't really wow me. This episode could have done with a really good original piece or some really good incidental music to accent the courtroom scenes. I think it really could have set it off, but we didn't get it. This episode is the tale of things we should have got but didn't get, I guess you could say. Thematically good, musically poor, visually, what can I say? It's poor with the statement, with the qualification that we do see old dress style Starfleet uniforms coming back, together with the triangular lattice work badges, where like those little metals like snap together into these cool shapes. That was really cool. It's really cool seeing these boisterous Starfleet uniforms come back. That was pretty sick. So visually, I'm going good. Ultimately, just because I thought the uniforms were that cool. No ships though. Very disappointing for me. Plot wise, again, it felt one note. It felt like we didn't get enough. It felt like we reiterated the same point too many times. It felt like there was a lot of red herrings in this plot. Plot threads that just kind of went to a dead end. It wasn't really about anything. Very one note. And the worst sin of all is that the victory at the end felt like it came totally at random. We just noticed this thing in this book. I would have liked to see a case maybe be built up a little bit more. Maybe it was built up and I was just too stupid to understand it. Because I tend not to watch these types of shows. But that's the beauty of Strange New Worlds, you know? One episode can't really sink it. You know, it's not serialized, I guess you could say. It's each individual episode telling an episodic story. One episode can be like a legal thing. One episode can be an adventure. One episode can be a bottle episode. Hopefully, one episode's going to be a cooking episode. What do you think of that? With that out of the way, I'm going to have to go ahead and unfortunately give this episode just a 4.5. For me, it's not going to be a rewatch. I'm happy that Una got off. I'm happy that we can go back to normal, which just makes you wonder, why didn't we just stay at normal? That's the ultimate problem. A thematic issue that belongs in the future of Star Trek. Nice sentiment, a nice moral message. But we're solving a problem that we maybe shouldn't have had. And whether or not you feel the problem was solved neatly is up to you. I think it was solved kind of muddled, kind of boring. The episode was maybe longer than it needed to be. And that's unfortunate. Should have had some cooler flashbacks. Lots of opportunities missed because potentially lack of funding? I don't know. Lack of time? Again, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes really. I'm just an engineer. Don't ask me. I just fix stuff when it's broken. I'm Lieutenant Merrick, and I'm going to see you next week for the next episode, which looks pretty interesting. I'll see you next time I see you. So long.